Not a lot of time to spare as the Dolphins have a quick turnaround for Thanksgiving night. So we're taking a final look at the Patriots game and looking briefly at the AFC conference landscape.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I am your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL draft lead for the 33rd team. Want to thank all of you who check out Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. So tip of the cap to our everydayers. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're going to get started with the Packers today. Or tomorrow on the show, but we're going to get started on transitioning away from this New England Patriots game that wrapped on Sunday with the Dolphins with a big win, 2-touchdown win. And I think the number one point of emphasis that I have coming out of this game, as I reflect on the way the game script went, the questions that everybody has coming out of the game, continuing to look at the running game and the success of the Dolphins running game or the lack thereof. I see some context in the way that this game played out. And Mike McDaniel kind of alluded to this to some degree with his press conference yesterday, his day after press conference. And he was asked about Alec Ingold as an example, who played 9 snaps. And McDaniel alluded to the fast start to the football game for the Dolphins, scoring 24 points in the second quarter, kind of allowed them to take some liberties, I suppose, would probably be a good way to put it, with certain personnel. Obviously, Teron Armstead leaves in the fourth quarter. All good things. But Patrick Paul comes in and plays the fourth quarter. Those are valuable reps for him as a player who we last saw him in week 4 on offense against the Titans. It's the last time Patrick Paul took offensive snaps. This is a second-round pick, and a player obviously is the assumed heir to Teron Armstead. Very important player to make sure that you have a very good grasp of where he needs to be better and what he does well and player development, so on and so forth. So a few elements like that maybe were contributing to why the Dolphins finished this game with 65 yards. I would say the Dolphins' tight end room didn't have a great game. It also was not the worst performance I've seen from this group. And I think Kendall Lamb is really settling in pass protection. I think you do have some decisions to make as far as when you're going to line up and run the ball with your traditional runs. If it's Kendall Lamb with one of the tight ends that you currently have on the roster, assuming Jack Stoll doesn't leap up and take reps, which would be a bit of a surprise. The downgrade from Austin to Kendall in the run game, I'm feeling it. I'm seeing it. Now, the good news is there are ways that you can circumvent that, and there are ways that you can, with the screen game and the passing game and some of the creative runs, there are things that you can do. But when the Dolphins have got to have it run situations, don't be surprised if they run left. Because I just don't think you have the push and the athleticism at that right tackle spot that Austin has, and it makes it very clear the value that Austin Jackson brings to the football team, despite however many pressures he gives up when the Dolphins are losing in the third quarter by 3 touchdowns to Buffalo in week 2 against a Hall of Fame pass rusher. It's a good affirmation for Austin. Now, there's an offseason conversation to be had about Teron and whether he's going to continue to play. And now he's on the injury report with knee issues, and you're looking at 6 games left to play. And how do you manage that with him and get him through it as best as you possibly can? And if he doesn't come back, then I think it's fair to say that there's a need for a swing tackle, at least at a minimum. Do you want a veteran player? Like, there's a whole can of worms that you can open with that. But as I watch the Dolphins' offensive game tape, And let's be fair. I mean, they played two teams that are towards the top of the draft order right now, but they managed to, they averaged about 270 yards of offense. They found ways to get their playmakers the football, whether it's Jonnu Smith or Jalen Waddle in this game. They had active screen game, which can be used as an extension of the run game. Mike McDaniel talked about offensive linemen taking short sets and being aggressive in the passing game, but still getting the ball out fast, and it has elements of a run play. That's a very Andy Reid-esque mentality about the run. You know, Andy Reid, there's been a decade now, it feels like, of I remember I grew up in the Philadelphia market, right? And Andy was with the Eagles for a really long time. And Andy, the sports talk radio callers, every Monday, whether it was win or lose, whether they won by 3 touchdowns, whether they lost by 3 points, whether they lost by 3 touchdowns, they would all call in and they would complain about Andy Reid's unwillingness to run the football. They say, we need to run the ball more. We need to run the ball more. And I think authentically, for this offense to work the way it is designed, you do need to be able to run the football. But you're at the point now where you're playing your last game in November and now you're into December. You have who you have on the roster. So how do you problem solve through this final stretch? How do you, and that might mean more, maybe you do finally see a 6 offensive line set to get some extra beef. Assuming Tehran is healthy and Kendall's out there and Patrick Paul, you could put him out there as the jumbo tight end. I'd love to see some stuff like that. The challenge for that with Miami is their passing game is really humming and clicking by getting 5 eligibles out into routes. And you saw that again against the Patriots, where there was a lot of spacing that you got more middle of the field closed and tighter intermediate area. And they still had spacing because they used all 5 eligibles. That was one of the big things as we're going through that ugly stretch at the end of September, beginning of October, and you're looking at how the offense is struggling, and you say, teams are really just smothering your routes because you're only sending 2-3 guys out in the routes and trying to max protect, and it's not, you're not posing a lot of threats to force teams to defend the full area of the field. That is very much in play for Miami right now with how this offense is operating. So there's give and take. There's good news and bad news coming out of that. But that's the big observation that I have coming out of this Patriots game. Now, we're going to look at the AFC landscape. But the important thing to remember here, and if you're watching on YouTube, it is in the right-hand third. The Dolphins have to mind their own crop here. They have to take care of their own business. They got 6 games to play. 4 of them are on the road. You get a huge opportunity on Thursday night to climb back to 500. We're going to talk a little bit about the AFC landscape and then finish with the Dolphins and their own crop next here on Locked On Dolphins. So make sure that you stick with us. Do you struggle for finding the perfect gift during the holidays? Maybe gift giving isn't your love language. You overthink and end up spending on something that is disappointing or nothing at all. If you're tired of wasting money on useless clutter that no one really needs, we've got the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. You can upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It is easy to use. Setup takes less than 60 seconds. There's seamless sharing, so you can invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or email with no account or subscription required. And the touchscreen's a game changer. You can swipe through photos, tap to see new photos sent, tap the heart button to say thank you from the sender. And there's 2 sizes to choose from, the original 10-inch or the larger 15-inch gallery frame. They look perfect in any room, and they can stand on their own, on a desk, or on the wall. And you can mount it on the wall easily as well. Now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, you can get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/NFL. Get $20 off on your purchase now at skylightframe.com/NFL. Football fans can tackle all of the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win as a new customer. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the and view the latest stats. You can see the play-by-play and so much more on the same page as where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Right now, the Dolphins 3.5-point dogs on Thursday night against the Packers. 3.5. That for bettors who like touchdown and field goal separations, 3.5, I'm sure, is going to get a little run. I would imagine this line does what the Packers and Raiders lines did the last 2 weeks for the Dolphins, where they were -7, and then it went to -7.5, and then a bunch of people jumped on Raiders +7.5 because a touchdown covers, and then it will go back to -7. And I think the same thing is probably going to happen here over the next couple of days for Dolphins +3.5 in Green Bay against the Packers. So never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So let's talk AFC landscape. The Chargers fell last night to the Ravens in a game that took a little while to get going. But nevertheless, the Chargers did lose to Baltimore at home by a final score of 30-23. The Chargers backdoored in them with a late touchdown to get that within a 1-touchdown deficit. But Baltimore really kind of took it to them after a kind of a lethargic first half. But the loss for the Chargers drops them as a wild card team to 7-5. Or 7-4, excuse me. And the Broncos are currently sitting at 7-5. Those two West teams are the teams that Miami is most directly looking up at in the AFC conference standings, because the Dolphins are 5-6, but they are the 8 seed as things currently stand. They are the first team on the outside looking in with 6 games left to play. And there's a bunch of speculation about, the Broncos and who they are and what their stretch looks like and if you can chase them down. But I think the thing that's important to remember, and it's very similar to years in which you're on the other end of the spectrum and you're like a team picking at the top of the draft, right? I think this is a great example. So you can look right now at Jacksonville is tied with the Giants and the Raiders for the worst record in football at 2-9. And you could feel at that stage like it probably feels like you're never going to win a football game again, right? But here's the deal. Jacksonville, having lost 4 in a row, they play twice against the 3-8 Tennessee Titans. They also play head-to-head against the Las Vegas Raiders before the end of the season. So that is 3 games for Jacksonville to be played against another 2-win team and a 3-win team. That will dramatically change and shift what it looks like come week 18. And I believe the stat was, Joe Marino told me this on Locked On NFL Scouting yesterday, but as of week 12 last year, like half the teams who were in the playoff field in week 12 did not make the playoffs. Let that sink in for a minute. Half the teams that played in the divisional round of the playoffs were not in a playoff spot as of week 12 last season. And that's where we're at. We're going into week 13. So if you look at teams on the outside looking in versus how it was last year, you could say 2 out of the 4 conference or divisional round participants on either side of the conferences are not in playoff spots right now. Now, I find that a little hard to believe with what it looks like this year. Like maybe Tampa on the outside gets hot, makes a run. Maybe San Francisco on the outside gets hot, makes a run. The Cardinals are kind of bubbling back and forth. They're tied for the division lead. Could they make the wild card and win a playoff game and be representative? I think those are probably the teams you're looking at: 5-6 Bucks, 5-6 49ers, 6-5 Cardinals as non-playoff teams that like could theoretically win a playoff game. On the AFC side of things, Miami's the only 5-win team, 5-6 team on the outside looking in. I don't have any faith that the Colts would make a playoff run at 5-7. So I don't know that those numbers are going to math, even if the Dolphins do the thing that we're hoping that they do, which is make some kind of a run. But think about the Chargers at 7-4. They just lost in Baltimore. It would have been a huge win for them. They're in Atlanta coming off their bye next week. And Atlanta has been very up and down. They've been frustrating. They lost 2 bad games. They lost in New Orleans against the Saints. Inexcusable game to lose as a potential playoff contender. And then they got smoked by the Broncos. But they're coming off their bye. And the Chargers are playing on short rest because the Chargers just played on Monday Night Football. It's a tough game. And then they're in Kansas City to play the Chiefs. And then they have the Buccaneers, who are 5-6, but have played without their top 3 wide receivers almost the entire season, and are traditionally a team that's very good against the run with Vita Vea in the middle of the defense. And then they play head-to-head against the Broncos. That's the next 4. Like you could tell me the Chargers could lose any or all of the next 4 games. I believe you. And they're 7-4 right now. So what happens if they wake up and they're 7-8? Well, we've seen teams do this. This happened to the Dolphins 2 years ago. 8-3 to 8-8. It's not a very fun place to be, but it happens, and it happens every year. I think there is some sustainability with the Chargers, but I also think there's an honest conversation to have that their wins have come against a Raiders team that the Dolphins won handily against as well. They beat the Panthers in week 2. They beat the Broncos head-to-head. They beat the Saints, who are 4-7. They beat the Browns, who are 3-8. They beat the Titans, who are 3-8, and they beat the Bengals, who are 4-7. Like, you're getting the big-time heavy hitters. Oh, and for all the critiques about the Dolphins in 2023, are there some parallels there for the Chargers? We'll find out, because it's going to be a talking point until they do it. We've lived that as Dolphins fans. Consider the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have the Ravens now breathing down their neck. They get the Bengals, but they get the Bengals in Cincinnati, with the Bengals coming off a bye this weekend. I think the Bengals could certainly win that game. It's a winnable game. And then they host the Browns, but then they go at Philly, at Baltimore, host Kansas City on a short week, and then they finish with Cincinnati again. You could tell me Pittsburgh could lose 4 out of 6 games here. I believe you. That potentially puts them as a 10-7 football team. You know, that gives another team that's potentially in the wild card conversation. Like, it's all going to sort itself out, and it feels insurmountable right now as the Dolphins, as a fan of the Dolphins, to sit here and watch some teams win that you're hoping lose. But even the Denver Broncos, they have 3 challenging games to finish right now, and do the math. They're 5 losses right now. They're in LA against the Chargers. That one's going to be a massive one for Miami. Then they're in Cincinnati with the Bengals having extra rest. And then they finish against the Chiefs week 18. And the best thing that could happen for Miami is that the Bills keep winning games at this point, so that Kansas City continues to feel pressure and needs to win their football games because they lost a head-to-head game against the Chiefs. So there's a lot of things at play here. But none of it matters if the Dolphins don't do their part and tend their own crop down the stretch. We're going to talk a little bit about the Dolphins and that crop next here on Locked On Dolphins. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. Spend it to improve yourself. Our sponsor, Hilldale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, and more. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you could start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you could go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or you can just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it is easy to get started at hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Kind of funny, you have a show talking about mind your own business, and we spend all of segment 2 talking about not your business, right? But the point is, you got a lot of ball game left. And you, as the Dolphins, have the opportunity to go do the thing, that a lot of people are skeptical that you have any capability of doing, and bucking narratives in the process. I don't think narratives go away. I think we've seen enough hurdles cleared for enough hurdles with this team in recent history to know that there's always going to be another thing. There's always going to be another thing you didn't do. There's always going to be another unachieved feat. And if you achieve some element of success that people don't think you can, all it's going to do is prompt people to find the next thing, right? And I made peace with that, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and argue with anybody about all this kind of stuff, about what the Dolphins are and aren't capable of. But this one on Thursday night, beyond the magnitude of trying to climb back to 6-6, it's a team that is a successful team with a 8-3 record. They're a good football team. You're in their place. It's a primetime game. It's a cold weather game. It's a lot of things that the Dolphins have not been able to have the stars align on under this regime for quite some time. And I'm not going to sit here and say with any amount of confidence that they're going to do it. But if they get this one, I think I'm going to be back in for the Final Five stretch. I think there's wins on this schedule for Miami. There's no doubt about that. But getting to 6-6 and setting up a 5-game season, which is effectively what it is, and going over some of the schedules for the other teams that we just talked about, if you do this one and you get that kind of momentum rolling, I can see it. And I could see it happening for the Dolphins to make the run to get a postseason spot. But none of this matters unless you don't seize the moment that's ahead of you here and now against Green Bay. And Green Bay is a team that is going to have some healthy challenges. I'm not going to sit here and make a huge deal about the weather. I know it's a big talking point, and you'll see the beat with updated weather forecasts every 2 hours on social media timelines and this, that, the other thing. I think Mike McDaniel made a great point yesterday, or whenever he was asked about the cold, about the context of the cold, right? Like, cold weather games, like top 5 coldest game in NFL history kind of cold. It's going to be cold, but like, with all due respect, like, if the cold forces you guys to shell up, especially if there's not any like significant wind and snow, I don't know what to tell you, right? Like, then you are who many think you are. And I think there is more good with this team than what we've seen in stretches this season. I've seen some signs of growth. I think this is really a nice reminder of why it's important to get all of the information and let an entire season play out versus what the temperature was with everybody, myself included, at the end of September and beginning of October. But this one carries some weight. This is not just another game. I want to see how they respond. I want to see how they meet the moment. And I have an expectation of how they will meet the moment based off what I think about this football team. But they're either going to do it or they're not, right? And if they do it, then the excitement level you will probably feel, I would imagine the downloads and views on this program are going to start creeping back up. Maybe not on Friday because it's a holiday, right? It's a post-holiday. There's usually a post-holiday hangover for the program, but you have seen a very clear like downturn of like the folks who are tuning in on a daily basis to this show now. Like, I know you guys are the everydayers because I've seen a lot of not everydayers that have kind of thrown their hands up with this football team and said, it's another same old Dolphins year, right? It's probably going to end in some variation and form of heartbreak. But I think they're capable of it not being the same old tired narratives from last year. I hope they're right, or I hope I'm right. But for Miami, you win the games that are out in front of you. And this is I think that, for my opinion, this is the hardest one that's left on the schedule. You win this one, I'm going to believe, because this is the hardest game left on the schedule, in my opinion, based off how the Texans are playing right now and how the 49ers are playing right now and how the Jets and Browns are playing right now. And if you win your games, I promise you, if you go 5-1 in the final 6, if you get to 10 wins, you will be in the playoffs based off that AFC conference and the landscape that those teams have, which is why I dove into a lot of that here today on the show. That's going to do it for us here on Locked On Dolphins. Going to start looking specifically at the Packers, who they are as a football team. We got a crossover Thursday with Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers. And, of course, the game on Thursday night. So, quick turnaround. Appreciate you guys for checking out the show. I am Kyle Krabs. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys for checking out the show. Talk to you all again tomorrow.